Good morning, students. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Okay. So, 16 students have joined. There's still more to join. Anyways, we can start with the lecture, right? So, as I told you yesterday also that today we are going to discuss about the history and history in see we never neglect history, right? So history is very important, whether we are talking about science whether we are talking about plant pathology, whether in any subject. So any subject when we study or in any topic when we start, so we always talk about, or we always look into the past, that what was just give me 1 second, there's important call, just 1 second, I'll be back. Okay, so as I was saying, that history of any subject or any topic is important. Why this is important? Because it tells us that how the things were invented first, and who were the what were the remarkable achievements of the people who were involved in that area, right? So in plant pathology also, there are a lot of things or a lot of people who have played a major role in the inventions. If we start from, I mean, for example, in the earlier times, people did not know that diseases existed, right? So earlier time, what happened, that people used to think that it is because God is angry with them due to some reason. So that's why the diseases, their plants are spoiling, right? So this was the basic. This was in Roman, I guess. In Romans, they used to think that they were the rusts and some diseases which were caused in their crops. So they used to think that this is maybe due to the wrath of the god, and in order, so they used to please the god. They just try to please the god so that their crops are not destroyed anymore, right? So from that time, when people did not knew that even plants can be infected, to this time when we have all the facilities to identify the pathogens, to study everything about the pathogens, to even see the pathogens also, that how they look. We know the genome of the pathogen also, right? So there are a lot of landmarks, how they discovered the disease cycles, how they discovered the rusts, how they discovered the some nematodes, how nematodes were identified as to be causal agents, how viruses were identified, right? So there are certain landmarks in the history which explains the important landmark work which are done by different people in India and world, right? So when we talk about history, we talk about the world, and then we talk about the Indian contribution in the history also. That what are the important people in India who have played an important role, right? So for this, I have one PDF. So I'm going to share my screen because PDF I cannot share here, right? So I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know if it is visible or not, right? Yeah, please let me know if it is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Right, so it is basically a PDF where it discusses the history of a plant pathology, right? So as I discussed, it starts from the ancient period. So literature of European and Vedic eras, it definitely gives some information on the plant diseases and their control, right? So as I told you earlier, people were not aware of plant diseases, so because they could not explain that why it is happening, so they used to think that these are the manifestation of the wrath of the god, right? So they used to please those superpowers or the god also. For this example that I discussed, that in the 4th century BC, the Romans, they suffered a lot from the hunger, which was caused by repeated destruction of cereal caused by the rust, right? Rust and other diseases. So they created a separate god whom they named as a Rovigus. Right? Rovigus means rust-like color, or a color which has basically on the basis of the symptoms, rusts are a brown or those light brown color. So that means a Rovigus, right? So they created a separate god whom they named the Robigus, and then they thought, okay, if we'll please the god, then definitely if we offer prayers and sacrifices, so that god would protect them from the dreaded rust, right? So they even established a special holiday for Robigus, which they called Robigalia, during which they used to sacrifice red foxes or red dogs, foxes, and cows to attempt to please. See, everything is symbolic. So red foxes, or because rust is a reddish brown color, so similar kind of a offering there are given to the god so that they do not destroy their crop, right? The first person to study and write about plant diseases is a Greek philosopher, which is called Theophrastus. He made observations on the plant diseases in his book Inquiry into Plant, right? So at that time also, his experience were a lot about imagination and observation, but not experimentation. So what he saw and what he thought it could be, he mentioned those things in his book, right? So his era, he worked from 370 BC to 286 BC, and he was the first botanist to study about the disease of trees, cereal, and legumes. So what he did, he divided the plant diseases into external and internal. So external diseases caused by some factors like temperature or a moisture were categorized in that. Then internal diseases caused by some changes in the internal condition of the plant, right? So a very broad classification he gave. And then he said that the different part, he also studied and observed that different plants are affected by different types of the diseases, right? He also observed it carefully that it's not the similar kind of a symptom, because he must have seen different kind of a symptoms on the different plants. So that gave him idea. He got an idea that okay, different plants are affected by different types of the diseases, right? Then he also studied that some plants, they are prone to infection than the others. For example, cereals were affected by rust, then the pulses were affected by rust, right? The cereals were mostly affected by the rust as compared to the pulses. And among cereals also, he noticed that barley is more attacked than any other crop, right? So whatever, in a very simple language at that time, whatever he saw and whatever he felt could be the reason, he just put those things into that book, right? So he again, he was first to recognize influence of environment and topography of land on the plant diseases. So he just a very simple thing he noticed that plants which are grown in elevated area or higher areas, they are less affected by the plants that are grown in a lowland, right? So this could be the environmental condition, because we know at higher elevations or hills the temperature is a different, there are different climatic conditions as compared to the lowland. So this then he got an idea that it is due to the different environment and topography. And they affect the plant diseases in a different way. So he wrote two important books, which is first is the Historia Plantarum, and second is the De Causis Plantarum, right? And he is also regarded as the father of botany, Theophrastus, right? Then coming to the second page. Okay, so in India again, we all know, right? A lot of information about diseases is mentioned in Rig Veda, Atharveda, or Shastra of Kautilya also. Then Shushruta Samhita also, and Vishnu Puran, Agni Puran. All those old, the writings, we see that there is some mention of plant diseases. And in Rig Veda, there is not only the classification of plant diseases, but also the germ theory of the disease was being mentioned in the Rig Veda, right? And then there were Vriksha Ayurveda by Surpal in ancient India, which is the first book in which lot of information about plant diseases is given. So in this book, plant diseases were categorized into two groups, again, internal and external, like physiological diseases, and external, like the Theophrastus, he did that. And again, the external diseases were supposed to be due to attack of microorganism and insects. And in this book, there is a mention of the different treatments of the diseases caused by different agencies or different factors, right? Hygiene, tree surgery, protective covering with the paste, and special culture of plants are the practice which are still recommended. So these are the mentioned in the older time also, right? Then symptoms of plant diseases and mildew, rust, and blight are also mentioned in the Bible, in Shakespeare's poem and drama of other Christian literature, right? So all these things are being mentioned in the literature all over the world, not only in Indian literature, but in other literature in the Western countries also. There is some mention of the these kind of a diseases, right? So last year, I guess, when I discussed plant virology or virology. So there I mentioned that there was a Japanese poet, right? She was a lady, and she also mentioned in her poem somewhere that it is still summer, but she can see the yellowing of the leaves. Like, yellowing is considered as at the end of the season when leaves start falling. So she was wondering why in the summers she can still see the yellow leaves. So Konkan was the poetess, I guess. Empress, she was a Japanese empress. So in this way, in different literatures, there's a mention of a different kind of a symptoms which we now know, or which is being later were identified by to be caused by the diseases, right? So if we talk about the different people and their role, what they did, so it is like P.A. Michelli or Pier Antonio Michelli in 1729. So he was first to study the fungi, and he saw the spores of the fungi. And again, he was first person to attempt pure culture of fungi growing artificially on a melon species. So he must have just inoculated that fungi directly to the melon, and then spores must have been, grown, fungal spores. There they have been grown on just a raw, because melon provided the nutrition to the fungi to grow, so it grew on that melon also, right? And he described 1900 plants, among which 900 were fungi. He published a monograph, Nova Plantarum Genera. He is considered as a father of mycology also, right? Then Buller, a mechanism of how spores are being discharged in the fungi. Again, it was given by the Buller phenomena known as, right? Then Linus, right? Carl Linus, he was in 1753. He gave Latin binomial system for naming plants and fungi. He published Species Plantarum, and he's considered as the father of a botany, right? Then we have a Tillet. Tillet in 1755, again, he published some paper on a bunt or a stinking smut of a wheat, right? A smut disease which is being caused in the wheat by the fungi. And then, just a moment, he reported wheat seeds containing black powder on their surface produced more diseased plant than the clean seed. So this means that plants which are infected and which has visual fungal spores, definitely if we use those plants in growing the plant, they are producing the more diseased plant as compared to the visually clean seeds which don't show such kind of a signs. And he also believed that the toxins which is present in the black powder cause the disease, rather than the fungus. So what he believed that the fungus is fine. We are not causing disease due to fungus, but it is due to the toxin which is being present in that black powder, which is causing the disease. He showed contagious or infectious nature of a wheat bun disease. This means this disease is contagious and it can be transmitted to the other healthy plants also, right? Then we have a C.H. Persoon in 1801. So he was the first person to give real systematic of fungi and laid down the foundation of taxonomy of fungi. Again, he published a book, Synopsis Methodica Fungorum, right? So he classified many fungi using binomial nomenclature. He classified many fungi, right? Then Fries Elias Magnus. In 1821 to 1832, he published Systema Mycologicum. He is regarded as Linnaeus of mycology or a father of systemic mycology. And he also considered rust and smut fungi as the product of the disease plant. So he believed that the disease plants, they produces the rust and smut kind of a structure on the plant. Then Prevost in 1807, he proved that diseases are caused by the microorganisms, right? And he was first person to show microorganism as a disease causing agents. He also discovered the life cycle of a bunt fungus. He observed spore germination in a bunt fungus. He was the first man to suggest or use chemical copper sulfate for a seed treatment to control seed-borne disease. So that means he did something for the management of the diseases also. So Anton D. Berry, he is a very famous person. Anton D. Berry, 1831 to 1888. He proved that Phytophthora infestans, which is a fungus, was the cause of late blight disease of the potato. He studied this late blight of potato fungus, its nomenclature, and he renamed it Phytophthora infestans, right? So he worked on this particular fungus. He also studied rust, smut, and downy mildews. And he was first to study the physiology of plant disease and reported the role of enzymes and toxin in tissue degradation caused by Sclerotonia sclerosium in carrot. He reported heterocious nature of a rust fungi. He also introduced terms such as biotraps, facultative parasites, and facultative saprophytes, right? And he authored two books, Morphology and Physiology of Fungi, Lichens and Myxomycetes, and Comparative Morphology and Biology of Fungi. And for his all contributions, he is known as founder of a modern experimental plant pathology, and he's also regarded as a father of a plant pathology. So Anton D. Barry is regarded as a father of plant pathology. He also guided some famous people as his PhD students also. Then we have M.J. Berkley, 1855. He was the first person to observe root knot nematodes in the galls of the cucumber. So in galls, he studied the nematodes, and he is founder of mycology in the British, and he described around 6,000 species of fungi. He studied the late blight of a potato pathogen, rust of coffee, grape, and downy mildew, and he authored some books also. Then we have Julius Cohn. He again published the book in plant pathology, which called as a diseases of cultivated crops and its causes and their control. And he did some studies on the bunt fungi also. He used copper sulfate in the management also, right? So some of the work. Then Robert Harting was the person, he worked on a forest pathology, and he published two important books, and he's called as the father of a forest pathology. Then, okay, Millerdutt. We'll go for a Millerdutt. We'll not go for everyone. Millerdutt was the important person. He discovered Bordet's mixture in 1882, and this Bordet's mixture is being used in the management of many fungal diseases such as downy mildew of a grape, which is caused by Plasmoptera verticilla. And he also studied the root aphid phylloxera of a grapevine, and he did some hybridization experiment in order to have a resistant plant. So he just tried to develop some resistant plants also. Then we have Voronin from Russia. He discovered the cause of club root of cabbage. He studied its life cycle also. And he also suggested that if we remove if infected plant and if we burn them, so we can destroy the spores also, right? Then we have R.H. Biffen. Again, this person studied resistant to yellow rust in wheat. He studied that it was inherited and it follow a Mendelian law or a Mendelian fashion. So first to develop rust resistant variety, which was called as a ribbit against yellow rust of a wheat. So this he worked towards the development of a resistant variety. Then we have a floor. He gave gene for gene hypothesis concept in flax against rust. So this means for each gene confers resistant in a host, there is a corresponding gene in a pathogen that confers a virulence and a vice versa. So gene for gene hypothesis is a very important one. Okay, so Vendor Planck is also very important because he gave the concept of a horizontal and vertical resistant. He's written few books such as Disease Resistant in a Plant, Principles of a Plant Infections, Plant Diseases, Epidemics and Control. And he's also known as a father of epidemiology, right? Then we have H.M. Ward. He worked on coffee rust and life cycle of a pathogen. He also demonstrated hypersensitive phenomena in a brome grass which is infected with the brown rust. He wrote a book, Diseases in a Plant, and he's known as a father of tropical plant pathology. Then we have a Craig, J.H. Craig. He discovered the function of a pycnospores. Pycnospores are the spores which are being produced, right, of a Puccinia graminis stratici. He discovered the sexual stage of the rust fungi also. Then we have a E.C. Stockman. He showed existence of a physiological races in the wheat rust. He coined the term hypersensitivity. He wrote books, Principles of a Plant Pathology, right? Then Blacksley, he gave a concept of a heterothallism in a fungi. Then we had a J.C. Walker. He reported the role of a phenolic compound in a plant defense mechanism, right? So he worked towards the resistance or a plant defense mechanisms which plant uses against the pathogen. He wrote two books, Plant Pathology and Diseases of Vegetable Crops, right? Then we have Mueller and his co-worker who was involved in a phytolexin in a plant disease resistance. So what are the certain compounds which are being produced in a plant which helps in the disease resistance, right? So if we talk, this was about the fungal history. So if we talk about the bacteriology, Anton van Leeuwenhoek was the person. He was a cloth merchant. He developed magnifying lenses. He developed a simple microscope. He was first to discover bacteria, protozoa, and algae and named them as a little animalcules. He is regarded as the father of bacteriological word. Then Louis Pasteur, we all know, he proved the germ theory. He coined the term anaerobic aerobic organism. He proved the fermentation is a biological process. He also developed pasteurization process. He developed vaccine for a rabies disease, and he is known as a father of a microbiology. Then we have a Robert Koch. I guess we discussed Robert Koch enough when we discussed Koch postulate. So he proved that anthrax disease is caused by the bacterium. He gave Koch's rules or Koch's postulates or the proof of pathogenicity. He used gelatin as a solidifying agent in the media. He found the causal organism of tuberculosis disease also. He's considered as father of medical microbiology and regarded as father of bacteriological technique. So Koch's postulates we know already, so we are not going to discuss. Then we had a T.J. Burrell. He was the person who proved that fire blight of an apple and pear was caused by a bacteria, not a fungi. He was first to show bacteria can cause a plant disease. So otherwise, we were thinking that only fungi is causing the diseases. Then we have E.F. Smith. He gave the final proof for bacteria can cause plant diseases. He studied bacterial wilt of cucumber, crown gall of apple also. He gave the fourth step of a Koch's postulate. He wrote books such as Bacterial Disease of a Plant, and he is known as a father of a phytobacteriology. Phyto means plant, so plant bacteriology, right? So again, he was the for the first time he demonstrated that budding or a grafting could be another method of a transmission of a plant viruses, and we know this today, right? In budding or a grafting, if any one part is infected by the pathogen or a virus, so that process will definitely lead to the transmission of the virus to the other plant also. Then there was a Hesse. He used agar-agar as a solidifying agent, which we use till now. Petri developed Petri plates, and we call them as a Petri dishes or Petri plates till now. Then Doi and Ishii was the person who discovered mycoplasma-like organisms, which causes yellow type diseases or mulberry or ester yellows in the plants. Basically, MLOs in a when mycoplasma-like organism when they cause disease in plant are called phytoplasmas, not mycoplasma. We call them as a phytoplasmas, right? Then he also reported tetracycline can be used for the management of bacterial diseases, right? Then Davies and Worley was the first person who discovered spiroplasma in a constant disease. And then Windsor and a Black LM, they observed occurrence of Rickettsia-like organisms in a clover leaf disease, right? So this was all about bacteriology. And then virology, I guess we have studied history last time also. So Carolus Cluus recorded breaking of a tulips due to the viral infection. Then Adolf Meyer was the person who discovered tobacco mosaic virus disease. He named the symptom as a mosaic. He also showed that a sap transmission can lead to the transmission of a disease, right? He demonstrated that this disease could be transmitted from disease to healthy plant by a sap from a leaves showing mosaic symptoms. So a very simple experiment he did. He used the sap from infected tobacco leaves to put that sap to the healthy leaves. And then when those leaves also showed symptom, he proved that this disease can be transmitted by the sap. Then Ivansky, he demonstrated that tobacco mosaic virus could pass through the bacterial filters, right? Chamberlain filters were used at that time to retain bacterial spores. And he found that viruses could pass through those filters. So he suggested that viruses were smaller than the bacterium, right? So that gave in them the idea that these are small, even very small than the bacteria, so they are not being retained by that particular filter, right? Then M.W. Bijernik, he concluded that tobacco mosaic virus was caused by Contagium vivum fluidum. So that was called as infectious. Contagium means infectious, vivum means living, fluid means liquid fluid, right? Which he called a virus, right? So he discovered the causal agent of tobacco mosaic virus. He also coined the term virus. So M.W. Bijernik is known as the father of plant virology. Then W.M. Stanley, he was the first person he purified and crystallized tobacco mosaic virus, right? So he reported that viruses are protein molecules. He got a Nobel Prize for that. Then Borden proved that viruses are a nucleoprotein, and he shows that it consists of a protein and a nucleic acid, both tobacco mosaic virus, right? Then Gerer and Scram, he showed that RNA of tobacco mosaic virus is infectious, not the protein part. Nolan Rushka, we all know he developed the electron microscope, and we can only see viruses by electron microscope. Diner was the person who discovered the term viroids, right? So viroids were discovered much later in 1971. Before that, those diseases were thought to be caused by the viruses only. But then in 1971, they found that they are different than the viruses. And they found that potato spindle tuber disease is caused by small molecules of infectious ribonucleic acid, which he called viroids. Since viroids, they don't have DNA as a genome, they only have a RNA genome, whereas viruses have both DNA and RNA. And there were other differences also, that they were very much different from the viruses, right? Then Stanley Prusner, they discovered prions. We all know, we have studied prions last time in a scrapie disease. He got a Nobel Prize for that. Then Fire and Mello, they were awarded Nobel Prize for their work in RNA interference gene silencing by double-stranded RNA, right? These are the much discoveries in early 2000s. Then if we talk about nematology, Nathan Augustus Cobb contributed a lot to nematode morphology, taxonomy, and methodology. He also gave the term nematology, and he gave some technique to separate nematodes from the soil. He is known as a father of plant nematology. Then T. Needham was the first person, reported first plant parasitic nematodes in wheat called ear cockle of a wheat, Anguina triticale. So he was the first person to identify nematodes in a plant. Then history of a plant pathology in India. So D.D. Cunningham, he collected and identified fungi of India from 1850 to 1875. He also identified the causal agent of a red rust of a tea in Assam. He studied rusts and smut. Then K.R. Kirtikar was first Indian to collect fungi and identify them in India. Then we have E.J. Butler. He was first cryptogamist to India. He worked on a red rot of a sugarcane, wilt of a red gram, rice diseases, and he also studied the life cycle of a smut diseases. He wrote books on fungi and diseases in plants in 1980, and he established a herbarium at Indian Agriculture Research Institution. He is also considered as the father of Indian plant pathologies, and he became first director of Imperial Mycological Institute in 1929 in India, right? Then we have a J.F. Dastoor. He was first Indian plant pathology who worked on fungi and plant diseases, and he established the species of Phytophthora parasitica from the castor, right? Then K.C. Mehta, he worked on epidemiology of a wheat rust and regarded as a father of cereal rust in India. So he has done a lot of work on the cereal rust in India. Then B.B. Mundkar, he worked on management of a cotton wilt through resistant breeding. He published a book, Fungi and Plant Diseases. He was the first person to start Indian Phytopathological Society, and we still have this Indian Phytopathological Society with this journal, Indian Phytopathology. And this journal, Indian Phytopathology, is right now published from the Springer publisher, and it's still, papers are being published about phytopathology in this particular journal. Then MJ, he successfully introduced the use of antibiotics in control of plant diseases, and he also studied smuts and rusts, and he wrote some monographs of uridanales of word and cercospore, right? Then J.C. Luthra and his associates. So he developed solar treatment of a wheat seed for control for a loose smut. Then T.S. Sadasivan, he worked on biochemistry of a host parasite relation. He also developed the concept of a vivotoxin. Again, he worked on the mechanism of a cotton wilt. Then S.N. Das Gupta, he worked on biochemistry of a host parasite relation. He studied the disease called black tip of a mango. Then N.K. Patel, he studied some bacterial diseases in cotton, and known as a father of phytobacteriology. Okay, Y.L. Nene is very important. Y.L. Nene, he published many books such as fungicides in a plant disease control and viral disease of pulse crops in UP. So I have read many books of Y.L. Nene, and we have referred his many books in our uh, if they used to be referred in a plant pathology course curriculum, right? Then G.S. Kulkarni, who was a student of Butler, he gave a detailed information of downy mildew of a smut of jowar and bajra. Then Manoranjan Mitra, again, he worked on a helminthosporium, the rice disease caused by helminthosporium. He first reported Karnal bunt of a wheat from Karnal in Haryana. Then T.S. Ramakrishnan, again, he was mycologist to Madras government. He cultivated ergot disease of a rye for toxin production. Then he published some books also, right? So this was all about the history in a brief. So, right, this is a history in a very brief form. Otherwise, if we talk about a history, it could be, you will find some books also in the history where they have a very detailed history. So here we have just discussed the important points of a plant pathology and important landmarks of a plant pathology, that how and where in some things, or which year some of the remarkable discoveries were being done by the people in the area of a plant pathology, right? So this is again history part is important. So I don't want कि आप सब लोग इसको mug up करो, right? It is not that you need to remember everything, but then history is important. Theophrastus is important. Then some Indian history, then some of the initial histories that were such as Carl Linnaeus, what he did, right? Then P.A. Micheli, he was father of mycology, what he did. Then again Prevost, what he did. Then Anton de Berry is important because he has done a lot of work, right? He is also known as father of plant pathology. Then Berkley, and then Robert Koch, we already know, Wender Planck, right? So a few points about important points about the history you should know, because this is a part of your course. So yes, you should be able to tell the contributions of a few scientists in the history, right? So mostly, if the questions would come, they would come in the form of a what is the contributions or what are the major landmarks in the history, that kind, so that whatever important you feel, you should learn them and you can write in your own at your own will. So individually, definitely I'm not going to ask anything because that will make it a very elaborative one and difficult to remember, but at least remember the contribution of 3 to 4 people in the plant pathology. That should include one from the virology also, from the mycology also, from the bacteriology also, right? So one or two from each will help you out, right? So that's how it will be sufficient, right? So that's all for today's lecture. I hope there's nothing to uh, learn here. It is just a matter of interest to know that how it started, right? For example, the ancient history, when we discussed that they created a god and they worshipped a god, this is an interesting thing, something, right? Even till the later time also, I guess people used to believe that diseases or human diseases are also being caused due to the wrath of the god. So yes, somewhere they believe that this sacrifices were done. I think these are done till now, till today also in some parts of the India, right? They if wedding is there, they'll sacrifice something. If someone is born in the family, they'll sacrifice something to please God. So to please God, to so that God is there to help them and support them, and they are not, that kind of customs are being still being followed, right? And this is not only in India, as for example, you see this is being done throughout the world. Sacrifices done nowadays. I don't know. We see very less animal sacrifices. Sometimes they just, donate the whole animal to the that particular temple that they can raise them and grow them or whatever instead of killing. But otherwise, earlier time, a lot of sacrifices were done, especially of animals, in order to please the god or to make or as an offering to the god, right? To make God happy. So this is the part of the culture which is still going on. Some parts may be there and some parts we obviously we have moved to the cities. We still live in a place where these things are not important and these things are not done, but maybe in some villages or maybe in some um, those parts of a villages or country where there's a less of less of education or less of these things, so we may expect these things there, right? So let's not comment on that. Okay, so that's all from my side for today, and just go through them. As I told you, just one from each is sufficient, right? So that you are able to write. Fine. Okay, so if there's nothing to be, if you want anything to be explained or something is not understood, you can raise your hands. Otherwise, I'll just go for the attendance. Next week, we are going to start with the disease cycle. What is the infection process? What is the how it multiplies? What is the perenniation? What is the invasion? What is the colonization? So all those part of the plant pathogens. So that part we are going to take up, which is an interesting one. That how it carries out those processes, right? Okay, so please switch on your cameras for attendance. Adish Mishra,
Yes, ma'am.
Ayushi Jain,
Present, ma'am.
Present, ma'am.
Sam, sorry,
Present, ma'am.
Devanshi,
Present, ma'am.
Ishita Arora, Janvi Singh, she's there, Roop,
Present,
Kshitij Singh, Manaswini Sridhar,
present,
Namrit,
ma'am.
Manaswini is there,
Present.
Namrita Pal, yeah,
Present,
Namrita
ma'am.
is there, Nandini Raj, Nehal,
Present, ma'am.
Rupal,
Present, ma'am.
Sahiba,
Present, ma'am.
Sanjana Sharma,
Present, ma'am.
Shakti Bhadoria,
Present, ma'am.
Shivani Mishra,
Present, ma'am.
Tanvi,
Present, ma'am.
Tridiv, Vivek,
Present, ma'am.
Yukta,
Present, ma'am.
Tridiv, Vivek, Yuvraj.
Present, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so just go through the things history. This PDF I'll upload to your teams also. So just go through the first module that we have done so far. So next week we're going to start with the second module. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I'll see you on Monday then. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
I was not able to unmute my mic that time.
Okay, Tridev, it's fine.